Okay, welcome, and I want to start today by going over your photosynthesis worksheet. I'm not going to go over everything possibly, but we will get through here so that you can make sure you have the right questions when it comes times for the exam. So we're simply going to start here with some true and false, and hopefully you made sure you read your directions carefully, and if the statement's false, you change the underlying word for that. So what I would like to do is I'm just going to type in here on the ones that are false. So our first question here are photosystems of clusters of chlorophyll and proteins. As you read through the book, you should have found that this statement was true. That is what a photosystem is. Remember that we talked about chloroplast, and chloroplasts contain chlorophyll and proteins, and we call those things photosystems. Our second question was the light-dependent reaction begins when photosystem 1 absorbs light. This is our first false statement. Okay, this is our first false statement. Okay, it is not photosystem 1. This is one of those weird things that I can't really explain to you. And sorry for that, but it is actually photosystem 2 that we start with. Then we go through the electron transport chain, and then photosystem 1. Number 3, electrons from water molecules replace the ones lost by photosystem 2. That is what happens during the light-dependent reactions. That's the reason that we need water during photosystem 2. The water gets broken down. The electrons from those waters are then used for energy. ATP is the product of photosynthesis 1. No, ATP is not. That is false. ATP is the product of chemiosmosis. So again, we have a false statement here. It is not ATPH that gets produced during photosynthesis 1. It is NADPH that gets produced during photosynthesis 1. Okay, so again, typing in the correct answers here so that you can fix those if you had those wrong yourself. And I'm going to do some fixing up here so it looks a little better. Okay, then we move on to number 5. ATP and NADPH are two types of protein carriers. This also is a false statement. If you remember what we talked about in class here, solar energy is used to split the water. So what these two things are, get the right word here, are not protein carriers. What they carry is energy. Okay, these are short-term energy carriers which are going to be used later on during the Calvin cycle to produce the glucose. Now, we talked about, as we moved on, light-dependent reactions and the light-independent reactions. One of the things that gets produced that I mentioned earlier is ATP through the process of chemiosmosis. And your question here, how does ATP synthase produce ATP? What this does is it combines, it helps to combine, I should say, helps to combine a phosphate with an existing ADP molecule or adenosine triphosphate. Okay, so we're taking an individual phosphate, we're joining it to ADP, diphosphate, which already has 2, so now we end up with an adenosine with 3 phosphates, and that is ATP. Majority of the energy in that ATP is found in that last bond where that individual phosphate was joined. And where does this take place? We talked about the different parts of the chloroplast. This takes place in or across the thylakoid membrane. Okay, this occurs when the hydrogen ions are being pumped across, and then those hydrogen ions are used to produce the ATP. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to number 8. You had a chart to fill out, and I do want to go over this part. It's basically you are telling me the main things that occurred during each part of this. This is very important. Actually, if I were to quiz you over this, this would be probably the part that I would most want you to know. Okay, so first of all, what happens during photosynthesis 1? Most importantly, or one of the most important things, light gets absorbed by the chlorophyll. Okay, light gets absorbed by the chlorophyll. As a result, or the second thing that's very important that you know, is that the H2O, water, is broken down into 2 electrons, 2 hydrogen ions, and oxygen. Okay, so water is broken down. Okay, I'm just fixing these couple things here. And that E again stands for electrons, and electrons contain energy, as do the hydrogen atoms. Or hydrogen ions, I should say, since they are charged. Next, we have the ETC, or electron transport chain. In this case, special proteins get this right, sorry about that. Special proteins use the electrons to pump the hydrogen ions across the membrane. Okay, and again, just so you know. Okay, now we're going to move on to photosystem 1. Okay, and again, light is absorbed. We need to re-energize those electrons once again, and after that happens, we can make some NADPH. Okay, and then finally we get to this last part. They call it the hydrogen ion movement. I do want you to remember this is what I called chemiosmosis. So I'm just going to add that in there. And then we'll go from there. Okay, what happens here? This simply is the hydrogen ions are used to produce ATP. Okay, so there is just a quick overview of everything that is going to happen during that part. Okay, I'm going to have to pause this video here, and then I will show you a second part here in just a second that completes the worksheet.